The ad revenue for this video, if it doesn't get demonetized, will be donated to Trans Lifeline, which is a crisis hotline for trans people. Preston, he, him, said, "A Broadway stage is not the place for a creative team's misinformed learning experience to play out. If a show can't handle the actual gravity of the topics it thought would be exciting to take on, then the team was not prepared to tell this story in the first place." What they are doing is straight up gaslighting and victim blaming. And to put it lightly, it was a dumpster fire. Hi friends, how are you? I hope that you're very, very well. So before I get started, I just want to make it very clear that in this video, I'm not trying to speak for anybody else. I can never begin to understand the lives and experiences of trans and non-binary people, but this video is merely to kind of shed a light on what is currently happening on Broadway. And as we get ready for Broadway to reopen, some things need to change, and I want to use the little platform that I have to raise awareness to some of those issues and to hold the people in power accountable for the damage and harm that they are currently doing to people in the trans and non-binary LGBTQ+ community. We need to support our trans colleagues. We need to support young trans and non-binary youth who are dreaming of being on Broadway someday and are seeing this situation and thinking that there's not a space for them or that they're going to be erased. It's not okay. I hope that this video will hold some of the audience members of Jagged Little Pill accountable. People who've seen the show and love it and are thinking, oh, it's awful what's happened, but it's my favourite musical and it's okay to love a show. But at the same time, standing up for people who are being directly harmed and standing up for what is simply right is more important than I just love the music. So this is for those people, or for anybody else who just doesn't really know what has been happening with Jagged Little Pill. If you don't know me, by the way, my name is Amy and my pronouns are she, her. I will also be leaving links to the sources and creators that I have been listening to and learning from so that I could make this video. I highly recommend looking them up and supporting them. I will leave, as I say, all of their links below. I truly don't believe that you can be an ally, to be a theatre fan and a part of the LGBTQ+ community and not care about what is happening right now. For anybody who isn't aware as well, just for language and things, a cisgendered person is a person whose sense of personal identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex, whereas non-binary falls under the transgender umbrella. Since non-binary people typically identify with a gender that is different from their assigned sex at birth, though some non-binary individuals do not consider themselves transgender. So for that reason, I will be saying trans and non-binary, if that's okay. I do want to give a content warning to discussions of transphobia and trans and non-binary erasure. I also want to make it very, very clear that any transphobic, harmful, offensive, exclusionary comments will just be hard and fast deleted. It won't be accepted. Okay, so let's get started. So currently there is a huge issue around trans and non-binary representation within the theatre world. We've seen it most recently in the UK with Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is a musical around 3 drag queens, one being a transgender woman. And they basically put out a casting asking specifically for trans and non-binary performers. Seeing that bar one production in the US, the role of Bernadette has always historically been played by a cis man, even though it's a transgender woman. People were very excited about this, obviously. And then the casting came out, a cis man had been cast as Bernadette again, and they had cast a trans performer as his understudy. My friend Mickey Jo did an amazing video all around it. I highly recommend watching it. I'll leave a link to it down below. It's things like Bring It On having a trans female character that has again continuously been played by a cis man. On the UK tour that was planned to go ahead last year, a cis man was playing the role again. Much like Priscilla, they have put out a casting requesting trans and non-binary performers to come forward, but at the moment we don't know how that's going to be cast. But today I'm specifically going to be talking about Jagged Little Pill, the Alanis Morissette jukebox musical, specifically the character Jo, currently played by Lauren Patton. So I heard about this situation a few months ago, late last year, and to be honest, the reason why I hadn't spoken about it before now was, to be honest, I just didn't think that I was in a position to talk about it from a knowledge point of view. I hadn't seen the show, and Broadway was closed at the time, and I probably naively thought that maybe things would be resolved and sorted by the time theatre was due to reopen. We now know that that's not the case, and so that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I hope so deeply that you will care about this enough as well to use your voice. I'm begging you. It's time for us, the fans of theatre, actors and performers, to use our voices and the power that we have in the best way that we can to make a change. So to explain the situation, so Jo is a character in Jagged Little Pill played by Lauren Patton, who has since been nominated for a Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical. So as in many Broadway shows, they usually do an out-of-town tryout. Jagged Little Pill did one in Cambridge at ART. Jo was very clearly a non-binary teen lesbian whose main kind of conflicts within the show was their mother's misunderstanding and lack of support of their gender identity, and also their best friend slash girlfriend cheating on them with a cis male, resulting in Frankie misgendering Jo, which then culminates in the massive like show-stopping number You Oughta Know. Lauren Patton, by the way, playing the role, is a cisgendered woman, and her pronouns are she, her. Now, when it was announced that Jagged Little Pill would be transferring to Broadway and that Lauren would be reprising her role, people started to question why a cisgendered woman would be playing a non-binary character on Broadway. Ezra Menas, Z, here, they, there, is an ensemble member in Jagged Little Pill and also covers the role of Jo in the musical. Ezra has been a part of the show since its very beginning, been through lots of workshops, did ART, and has taken the show to Broadway. Most people who had seen the show at ART pretty much expected Ezra to take over the role, or another non-binary performer, when Jagged Little Pill made the jump to Broadway. However, once the show opened, it was very clear that the writers had totally erased the non-binary story and life of Jo. Jo was now exclusively using she, her pronouns in the show, and Jo's main new conflict was their mother praying that they wouldn't be a lesbian, and again their girlfriend, best friend cheating on them. So why is this a problem? There's always lots of rewrites between an out-of-town tryout and going to Broadway. Why is this different? So to put it simply, there is such a drought of trans and non-binary stories and characters and experiences shown on stage and in theatre and media as a whole. So any representation is incredibly important. It should be handled with the utmost care and respect to ensure that the stories of and for marginalised people are told with truth and honesty and fully convey as much as possible an accurate lived experience. I'm sure that I don't need to go into why representation is important, but I've spoken to so many trans and non-binary friends. I've listened to creators who've talked about being able to come out to themselves or to their family members by using examples in media to relate to, or even to identify to themselves or to loved ones. So when there is an opportunity for a principal on Broadway to be a non-binary lesbian, this has been such a source of excitement for so many people in the LGBTQ+ community and their allies, and this has all just now been taken away, and understandably people were upset. It was also at the same time noticed that Lauren, who had previously on social media used they them pronouns to refer to Jo, those tweets had been deleted. During the time that Broadway was closed and the 2020 Tony Award nominations came out, Lauren had been nominated for her role playing Jo in the featured female in a musical category. And it was around this time that a subscriber directed me to a Twitter thread that had an exhaustive list of examples articles and explanations of what was happening with Lauren and with Jagged Little Pill. People were talking about it, but certainly not enough. Not in the numbers that should be talking about it. Move on a few months and Christian Lewis, who is a non-binary theatre blogger, wrote an excellent article around trans erasure of the character Joe and what that meant. I will leave a link to the article below. It's brilliant. Highly recommend. Shortly after that article, Jagged Little Pill's creative team released a video titled Gender Expression and Sexuality onto YouTube. In the live stream, there was Lauren, Diablo Cody, and a couple of members of the advisory board that Jagged Little Pill had apparently consulted in the writing and talking about the nuance of creating a role like Joe. And to put it lightly, it was a dumpster fire. So the video was not in direct response to Christian's article. It came out shortly after, but the actual video had been recorded previously and it was only then put up onto YouTube. However, it did open the discussion to people who possibly hadn't really engaged in what was happening before, but still not enough people. I will come back to the video because it's very important, but I just want to keep going with kind of the timeline of what's going on. But basically in that video, they said that Joe had never been anything other than a cisgendered lesbian teen, and saying that it was down to the audience's personal and, more importantly, incorrect interpretation that Joe was non-binary or trans. But then the next day, Jagged Little Pill released a follow-up apology? Excuse? What can we even call it? Because basically, again, they just said, yeah, Joe was never anything but cisgender, you're wrong. What they are doing is straight up gaslighting and victim blaming. Now, you know me, I don't like watching bootlegs. However, I felt that it would be impossible for me to really speak on this situation without getting as much information as possible. So I watched the Jagged Little Pill bootleg twice, and I also know that I won't go and see this show unless massive changes are made, and I doubt that's going to happen. So I feel no guilt in watching the bootleg. So I watched the bootleg twice. I also found an audio recording of the ART production, listened to that twice, compared the two, and I'm sorry, it's unrefutable that the role of Joe was written as non-binary. The clearest example of it is as follows. I'm going to put in clips here. In the ART production,
Angie's usually so chill. Yeah, Angie is chill about the lesbian stuff, but last night she was like, I don't get it. Do you want to be a boy or a girl? And I said, first of all, if I got to decide what I was, I'd be a koala. And I tried to explain the whole gender spectrum thing, and it just got shittier from there.
Oh, man.
Yeah. By the end, she was like, are you sure you're not just jumping on some bandwagon?
I guess not everyone is gonna understand.
You do.
and then they sing Hand in Your Pocket. Hand in my pocket? I got one hand in my pocket. Let's just make it clear. Joe said, my mum is okay with the lesbian stuff. I tried to explain the whole gender spectrum thing and it got shittier from there. Okay, here is the Broadway version of that scene.
Your mom just yells at you. Find praise for me. Dear Jesus, please don't let my only child be a gay. Especially not one of those obvious gays who wears performance fleece and utility sandals. In the name of Fox News, amen.
She's still giving you shit about your clothes?
Oh yeah, the queer panic is at an all-time high. She's like, why would you choose to look like a boy? And I'm like, why would you choose to look like the Talbot's catalog threw up on you? Yeah, I like that.
Why are our parents so obsessed with who they want us to be?
I know, right? If I could choose what I wanted to be, I'd be a koala.
I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Joe.
I don't care.
It's completely changing Joe's storyline and conflict to overcome and deal with in the show, completely changing it and erasing this narrative of gender identity. As you can see in the ART production, Joe clearly says that their mum is okay with the lesbian stuff, but not about the gender stuff. There's a slight discussion about gender expression through the clothing choices in the Broadway version, but that's it. Other examples are in the ART version. Joe says,
I'm the same person, Mom. Nothing else has changed. You don't understand. You're taking something away from me. This is much harder for me than it is for you.
Broadway version, Joe walks on wearing a pink cardigan.
I'm worried. Are you happy? Don't even try, Joanne. I don't know why I bother.
Again, it's about an external expression of how one dresses. Another super clear example of this is how the parents in the show frequently call Joe Joanne. In the ART production, Frankie's dad calls Joe Joanne.
Joanne! Wearing dog tags with no shirt like a douche! Frankie barely knows the person I met like 5 minutes ago. Also, do not fucking call me Joanne.
And storms off because clearly they're upset at being dead named. On Broadway, same situation, Steve calls Joe Joanne.
Joanne! Wearing dog tags with no shirt like a douche! Frankie barely knows this person I met like 5 minutes ago. So please do not call me Joanne! Not a fucking fabric store!
Joann's is a fabric store in America. Basically just diminishing the whole issue of being dead named by somebody to a joke. I think the fact that there wasn't a joke in the ART production shows that it wasn't supposed to be funny. Shows that it's, again, Joe dealing with the world around them not accepting their gender and presuming someone's gender. Whereas the Broadway production, it's, no, don't call me Joanne, I don't like that name. I'm not a fabric store. Do you see the difference? And then finally, the last example I'm going to use. This is right after Joe has found Frankie in bed with Phoenix. Frankie runs off. Joe goes to collect her in the car. At ART, Frankie says,
I didn't think you and I were in an exclusive relationship. We're best friends. It shouldn't matter if one of us gets a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Or miscellaneous. Miscellaneous. Right. Why would you take this seriously? I'm glad you found something healthy and rational and clearly not as legit as your fuckboy Phoenix. It wasn't because you're a girl. I mean... What? You know what I meant. Oh, God, Joe, I'm sorry. That has nothing to do with it. I just... What?
Joe says miscellaneous, meaning not in the binary, meaning that they could have a boyfriend or girlfriend or partner. They clearly hadn't found the right word. Joe then reinforced that as a non-binary person by saying miscellaneous. And then on Broadway, it's kind of just diluted to Joe being upset that Frankie has cheated, which also plays into the trope of bisexual people being cheaters and that they will leave you for somebody else. It's like, come on, please. There's so little positive bisexual representation, and then we get it in a musical and it's reduced to another trope, whatever.
I'm really sorry. I was gonna tell you.
Yet you didn't? Because you knew what you were doing was wrong.
I didn't think I was gonna fall in love with him.
Love? Congratulations, Frankie. I'm glad you found something healthy and rational. I'm clearly not as legit as your fuckboy Phoenix.
That's not what I'm saying, Joe. I just didn't think you and I were in an exclusive relationship.
Right. Why would you take this seriously?
You know I didn't mean it like that.
I want you to know.
It's very clear that Jo was written as a non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid character, and to say otherwise is a flat out lie. It's a lie. So in the video from the creative team, as I say, they basically said, yep, Jo was never anything other than cisgendered, and in this video we're going to talk about gender expression and sexuality. So basically how queer people tend to dress more gender fluid, more androgynous, whichever words you want to use, less in traditional binary clothing styles. Did I explain that right? They talked about the need for responsible storytelling. They talked about how language matters, and then proceeded to describe Jo as a grey area. And Lauren also says that there's a need for specificity when creating a character like Jo, and yet also again described Jo as a grey area. They said in the video how it's impossible to show everyone's experience, and there's no right way to express someone's sexuality and gender, and basically how they did their best with Jo, but someone will always feel excluded. Yeah. Especially when you completely erase the storyline. That's how people feel excluded. They said that they were as informed and sensitive as they could be. Now, Preston Allen, who was in one of the panels that I watched, that I will leave a link to below, said on Twitter the most perfect statement around this, so I'm going to read it out. Preston, he, him, said, "A Broadway stage is not the place for a creative team's misinformed learning experience to play out. If a show can't handle the actual gravity of the topics it thought would be exciting to take on, then the team was not prepared to tell this story in the first place." Exactly. P. Carl, who is a trans creator who was on the advisory board in the JLP video, said, literally in the video, there is a desert of trans and non-binary characters within theatre, and yet here there is a panel of people who apparently care enough to make this episode and have consultants doing the work, as they say, on a Broadway show with a huge following, with the opportunity to add a character, not take one away. I think that sometimes we think that once a Broadway show has opened, there's not possibility for change, whereas we've seen with Mean Girls, when they had a cast change around, they decided to change bits of the show to make it better, to update it. You can do the same, you know, you can make reparations for what you've done. You can! It would be great. When the topic came up of Lauren having previously used they them pronouns to refer to Jo and had spoken to trans and non-binary people at stage door, she said the reason for doing this was that she didn't want to invalidate people's experience and relation to the material, but basically it was wrong to use they them pronouns because Jo was never anything other than cis. I'm sorry, but this is literally blaming the fans and saying that's how they interpreted the character. I just told them what they wanted to hear, really. And I watched a great panel, the one that Preston was in, by Dr. Drama on YouTube. Again, I'll leave a link to it. Hayley StJames, they them, a non-binary lesbian theatre creator, had seen the show at ART and spoke about having this like gender euphoric moment and day of going to see the show and speaking to Lauren and seeing themselves on stage and it being this incredible moment in their life. And then to hear basically that Lauren was like, yeah, well, I just told people what they wanted to think, and it's really them that interpreted this whole thing and essentially lying to people in the moment is so wrong and so upsetting. Lauren also said, yeah, now when I look back I see it and I'm like, yeah, that felt like I was confirming that this character had a trans identity that I don't hold, and more specifically she said, and that wasn't developed. I'm sorry, but if it wasn't developed, then why are you having this discussion around Jo in the first place? Why are we not just discussing Jo as a butch lesbian? This is clearly something that was developed, discussed and explored. Otherwise, why would there be so many references to gender in Jo's previous scenes. It's a lie! You are lying! The problem is that I feel like their whole thing with the video was that they were kind of conflating the idea between queerness and gender expression. Queerness and gender expression can be intertwined, but they're not exclusive. The video as well felt like just a whole lot of like backslapping. Oh, well done us. In a 20-minute video, they managed to comment about the fact that Jagged Little Pill was nominated for Tony Awards 6 times. 6 times in a 20-minute video where it has nothing to do with Tony Awards. Come on. They were also saying, oh yeah, you know, we got an advisory board together to work on the show. It should be noted that that was after they received feedback at ART. And like, when you have a show, regardless of this gender discussion, when you have a show that's dealing with assault, drug addiction, race, and so many more serious, very complex, triggering topics, the very bare minimum would be to get an advisory board. The bare minimum. And they're like, look at us, we got an advisory board. We're doing the work. And they're sat there like patting themselves on the back for it. And there was a moment where the producer brought up the phrase, nothing about us without us, and was like, I heard this wonderful phrase, nothing about us without us. And she was like, I didn't come up with it myself, but you know, great to bring it up. And it's like, it was actually coined by disability activists, which doesn't mean that it can't be used for marginalised groups being involved in the storytelling of characters in those marginalised groups. But it was just the whole thing of like, oh, aren't we so great? The problem is that they're lying. They're saying, you've assumed this character's gender. They're saying, we only brought it up because that's what you wanted to believe. It does feel like having a non-binary character was more of a performative thing than we want to tell this story of a non-binary person. For a show that, as I say, covers so many very complex topics, it's kind of like they wanted to have a bit of everything in there, but when they realised people were and would continue to be hurt by Lauren playing a non-binary character, they decided to prioritise the actor rather than the story. Does that make sense? I don't know if I made sense there. It's like they thought for the out-of-town tryouts, we'd really like to have a storyline about gender, but not enough to actually cast it properly and execute it appropriately. They could have said, we've had Lauren with us since the very inception of the show. She was at the first workshop, the very first reading. She's a huge part of Joe, so we want to keep her in that role. But in the future, we could make changes, we could rewrite, but they haven't. They've just said, no, you were wrong, we were right. It's just lying. Oh my god, I hate liars. I think it is so wrong to pretend like all of this hasn't happened. It's ridiculous. It is a really difficult situation with Lauren because it's very rare that people will get to take a character from, like I say, its very inception to Broadway and to be nominated for a Tony. I do kind of feel as well like the things that Lauren has said seem quite scripted. I also think that she's kind of become a bit of a scapegoat. I feel like if she hadn't have tweeted things like calling Joe they them, they would have potentially said that none of that happened. But there are literal receipts. And so I kind of feel like she's been put as the scapegoat of like, oh well, Lauren's an actor, she got it wrong, she was just trying to be nice, and she's the one who's kind of had to do all of these statements and things. I don't know, like in some ways I like understand, and I also know that professional contracts, sometimes if you want to leave, you have to pay a huge amount of money, you have to buy yourself out of the contract. I can imagine being Tony nominated, that would be a higher cost. I don't know. I know that's what it's like in the West End. She has obviously been out of work for a year. I understand that maybe she's not able to leave right now, so I'm trying not to be too harsh on it. And for people whose identity is constantly questioned and denied by strangers, their family, colleagues, to have stories of non-binary and trans characters in such a huge place like Broadway. It's allowing people to be seen, and for cis people who maybe don't understand the lives of trans and non-binary people, relate and to understand and to learn. I just don't think that you can say you're an ally of the trans and non-binary and LGBTQ+ community and not care about this and not want to speak up about it. L. Morgan Lee, who was in one of the panels, said that cis people are so afraid of speaking up on trans and non-binary issues because they don't feel like they're well equipped or they're nervous of messing up. And I definitely understand and relate to that sentiment. That's part of the reason why I hadn't spoken on this before now and why it's taken me a while to get this video out. But like she said, it's okay to mess up and to be corrected and to acknowledge when you've made a mistake and to learn and move on. And then you're able to correct and teach your cisgendered friends who get things wrong and make mistakes. And it's doing it all with love and understanding. I'm not trying to come in here and pretend I'm a perfect ally either. I'm going to give you an example. I'm embarrassed about it, but here's an example. About 3 years ago, I went out for dinner with some kind of acquaintances, and one of the people at the table was non-binary, and there was a cisgendered male who was consistently misgendering my friend, and I didn't speak up and correct him. I think about this all the time and what I should have done and what I wish I had done. I've also spoken to my friend about it since and apologised, but I was so afraid of correcting a white cis man that I completely invalidated my friend's entire existence. I tell you this to let you know that we're all learning, and I hope that in me telling you that, it's like I'm not trying to be like, I'm amazing, look at me making a video on this. No, we all make mistakes and we're all learning all the time. I want to thank all of the trans and non-binary folks who have been standing up and talking about this situation and sharing their experiences. I can only begin to imagine how mentally taxing this must be for you right now, and I want you to know how eternally grateful I am for teaching us and for putting yourselves out there. I hope that people watching are listening and will be standing alongside you and doing this together to make appropriate changes for the future. I want to thank all of the panelists on the Dr. Drama panel. Honestly, you have to watch it. Cesario, who is a non-binary YouTube creator whose video I watched, and it was absolutely wonderful, really in-depth, explained everything fully, gave their personal experiences, and just did the most wonderful video that you have to watch. To Ezra Menas, to Christian Lewis for their article, and genuinely just everybody who's been speaking up. As I say, the ad revenue for this video will be going to Trans Lifeline, which is a crisis hotline for trans people. And what can you do? You can speak up about what is happening. Tell your theatre friends, tell your theatre teachers, your theatre professors, talk about it on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Support the trans and non-binary actors and creators who are speaking out about this. Support them emotionally, financially, mentally. Hit Jagged Little Pill where it hurts most to show that we as audience members care more about the lives and stories of our peers who we love and respect, more than just, I really like that musical, so I'm gonna go and see it again. Support other positive trans and non-binary representation in theatre. L. Morgan Lee, who I mentioned earlier, is going to be in the stage production of The Danish Girl, and she spoke about how the team on that production are aware of the issues with the film and making a positive portrayal of Lily's story to get it out there and to make sure it's more authentic. We need to speak up when producers are showing performative allyship and activism by posting casting calls for trans and non-binary people and giving a trans woman the understudy of a cis man to play a trans woman. That is performative. It's putting your own enjoyment of a musical aside and standing up for what is right. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope to any of my trans and non-binary friends who have watched this, if I've said anything incorrect, please let me know. and I really hope that you don't think I'm speaking for you. I'm just trying to let cisgendered audience members know, and I just want to spread the message of this. I hope that you're looking after yourselves, and let me know if I can do anything, and I love you and I support you, and yeah, thank you so much. All the love. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Bye.